Well, hello, Donna. How you
Hello.
doing?
I'm good. I am over-caffeinated and underfed. So this is going to be quite the interesting episode. This is going to be the
Well, that's good
fastest
to
Now
hear.
You Know episode ever.
That's great. I'm under-caffeinated, so I hope that we can balance here with that. And I'm really excited to talk about who we're talking about today. There's a lot of reasons why, and it'll come up over and over again, I'm sure, but the initial reason why Bass Reeves even came into my consciousness was through the amazing HBO miniseries. Well, I think it was supposed to be a series, but it was called Watchman. And this person, Bass Reeves, a real historical figure, was presented in Watchmen as if he were a superhero. And keep in mind, Watchmen is a superhero IP. So, of course, but after learning that this is a real person and this has actual historic roots, I started to get interested in looking up and learning a little bit about Bass Reeves. And so this was the perfect opportunity for us to actually take that time to learn a little bit more about him. So I'm excited to talk about him. Had you heard about Bass Reeves before we started doing this research for the show?
Not that I remember. The only thing that felt familiar was the mention of Lone Ranger because I remember seeing that movie. But I didn't realize, any sort of connection necessarily to Bass Reeves.
Yeah. So Bass Reeves allegedly inspired the Lone Ranger TV series, which also was started as a radio show and also was a 2013 movie in which Johnny Depp plays Tonto. So there's a lot of things happening there. Also, the Lone Ranger in that movie was played by potential or alleged cannibalist. And yeah, anyway, a lot of things going on.
I missed that memo.
Yeah, it's not something that you really need to see nowadays. Didn't age very well.
Yeah.
But the story of the Lone Ranger was popular amongst Americans just ever since it came out. Again, it started in the 1930s as a radio series, a radio drama, in which this deputy is catching the bad guys and everyone can shoot at him, but he's never going to get hit. And all of these stories about these elaborate ways that he catches his criminals kind of tie into the real life stories of Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was born into slavery. He was born in July of 1838, and he ended up becoming the first Black deputy marshal in the United States. How did that happen? He ended up leaving or escaping his enslavement, and he got mixed up with tribes of Indians, specifically Cherokee and Seminole Indians. And so he ended up being with the natives, learning their ways. And then as the West began their journey, Americans began their journey into the West, eliminating these communities, he was used basically as intel. He knew the languages, he knew travel patterns and things like that. And so he was used to catch outlaws during that time. And so these outlaws weren't necessarily Native Americans. These would be people that were trying to beat the government out west to settle and create their own communities. And that was a no-no. So you'd have the marshals and the deputies go out there and clean them up. A lot of the crimes that were happening around the time would be what I consider petty, but of course then resources were less than what we have now. So we're talking crimes like stealing horses, of course, crimes against humans, stuff like that, but a lot of property stuff. And Bass Reeves, in his position, he arrested about 3,000 people. It's said that he had never gotten inflicted by any gunshot wounds. It was also really emphasized that he came from a place of peace, which is an interesting thing, and we'll get into it. But that's the basic overview of Bass Reeves, our first Black U.S. deputy marshal on the west of the Mississippi, and he is a legend. And I already texted Donna about this while we were talking about research, but when I learned about Bass Reeves, it was through this amazing show. And it was through this lens of, oh, he's a superhero, he's a historical icon, and all these wonderful things. And then I'm looking at it like, yeah, he's the inspiration for the Lone Ranger. His story needs to be told. He is incredible. He's obviously skilled at all these things. He lived a interesting life with all these different communities, leaving enslavement and then moving in with Native Americans and then moving into law enforcement. Like, what kind of mind, like, what was he thinking about all this stuff? And as I get into some of the stuff that we have seen or read, I have my lip curled. So, spoiler alert for the podcast. Jonathan's not the biggest Bass Reeves fan, and it's not because of Bass Reeves. It's because of the people that love Bass Reeves. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's like, but why do you like it? Like, if you like it so much, it feels like I shouldn't.
Right. That's really it. It's like, because he represents to me, the independence that can come from being self-sufficient and being clever and all these wonderful things that I think spans across Blackness. Like, Black American culture derives from survival tactics and techniques, and this person just managed to do so in such a way that he became prolific. And that's cool to me. But the ways in which he had to do those things and the ways that legacy is held in certain communities, I'm less interested in. I'm like not interested in that. It's giving boot liquor in a way that's like nasty to me.
I think at first earshot, people might not totally understand why we say that there's this sort of complicated relationship between policing and Black people, but they might not really understand or know the history of policing as it is. So the origins of modern day policing can be traced back to the slave patrol. The earliest formal slave patrol was created in the Carolinas in the early 1700s with one mission: to establish a system of terror and squash slave uprisings with the capacity to pursue, apprehend, and return runaway slaves to their owners. Tactics included the use of excessive force to control and produce desired slave behavior. I, patroller's name, do swear that I will, as searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs, to be the best of my powers, so help me God. That was a North Carolina Slave Patrol oath. And so there, again, is the basis of having our bodies patrolled or controlled or policed through making sure we stay in our place, kind of thing. And so that's where we have an issue, as that being the foundation to have our modern day policing. And we see time and time again that hasn't exactly changed. In many ways, it's just masked differently. So slave patrols continued until the end of the Civil War with the passage of the 13th Amendment, which was the end of enslavement. Following the Civil War, during Reconstruction, slave patrols were replaced by militia-style groups who were empowered to control and deny access to equal rights to freed slaves. They relentlessly and systematically enforced Black codes, which were strict, and local state laws that regulated and restricted access to labor, wages, voting rights, and general freedoms for formerly enslaved people. So again, that's where that complication comes in, because you have Bass Reeves, who was born enslaved and then becomes formerly enslaved, and then becomes part of the policing system. So again, the complication is layered, very much so.
I just remembered one thing from the documentary, and this can stay in or get taken out. But as you talk about like the way that the story has been framed throughout history about policing in general and Bass Reeves in general, there's also the interaction with Bass Reeves with Judge Isaac C. Parker, who oversaw his murder case and stuff like that, and a lot of cases that he brought up. But this judge was known as the hanging judge because He sent so many people to death. And in the documentary that we saw, there was a bit, there was like something added to it. You could tell it was added to it after the whole thing had been produced. You could tell that they added in. And if you really think about it, he only hanged this many people compared to all the cases that he had. So was he the hanging judge or was he fair? And it's like, no, he's still the hanging judge. And it's still just as complicated that Bass Reeves is involved in this story at any point. You know what I mean? It's still, there's too much duality here to have a single narrative. You know, there's too much nuance involved. And I think that as we are going to be getting more Bass Reeves stories, I'd be interested to see if that nuance is actually covered or if it's a simple blanket. The world used to be so racist and now it's just less racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that do? So we watched the documentary. What was your experience watching the documentary that we saw?
I mean, it was a short documentary. It was only about 40 minutes. It was good. It wasn't super, I don't know. Maybe my connection to it is a little lacking, but I thought it was fine. It was interesting enough to, keep listening and watching and everything. But I don't know. I feel like this is not like maybe as impactful as either it should be or maybe we didn't learn enough in that time,
I agree. I think that maybe it's that we didn't learn enough. And listeners, if you do go and look up Bass Reeves, like the research materials that we use, we try to keep it free because if you're going to do a basic Google search of anyone that we learn about, these are the things that you'll see. And you should be able to access it just like we have. And unfortunately, Bass Reeves, as prolific as he is and as, historically relevant as he is, there's not a ton of well-produced media about him. There's a lot of conversation around him, and it's kind of circling around the erasure of Black identities in historical aspects. And that's kind of where it starts and stops. And then when you get into actual historical reverence, I guess you would say, in these different pockets of media, you kind of immediately slip into Blue Lives Matter territory, and that's where my lip starts to curl. Yeah. It was difficult for me to become super interested in his story, kind of like what you said, because of the messenger, and that's upsetting. That's just upsetting.
Well, I think just even what I've gathered from that documentary, and then even the other video that you'd sent me with the one maybe British gentleman that was speaking, it was like 16-minute. There's a complicated relationship of the government and his life, and simply existing as we kind of see today also. So it's kind of like a continued story. In terms of like government officials and Black people holding certain power in certain places, or like even, you know what? I thought about this. Trent, I know he's going to listen. My friend Trent, he's a Black officer out in Colorado, and we have done a couple real relatable episodes. But I wonder if we should have brought him on for this, because I think there is that duality of Black American, but then law enforcement, that his perspective, like, I don't know why. I should try and call him on this call and see if he come on.
We absolutely could.
Imagine?
I would be interested to know if he has a relationship with Bass Reeves, just being a Black person in law enforcement and what it means. Because for me, being outside of it and not a fan of it, it's going to hit a lot different. It hits so much differently. And also, like, we have to understand, like, my feelings about Bass Reeves and the way that it's presented are wholly informed by the context of today, 2023. If we look at it from the context of the late 1800s, then I think I would have a lot different feelings. Like, if you think about the opportunities that existed and the ways that this person really had to survive, sure, yes, great that he was awesome at the, and like, these stories are really cool. he was a really clever deputy. He managed to, like I said earlier, he managed to arrest about 3,000 people, which today context me is like, oh man, come on. But then context me would say, okay, you're really proficient at your job. Another aspect of his story, which is how it ties to the Lone Ranger stories, is that he was clever. He was illiterate, and so when he'd have to hand people their arrest papers, he'd have to do so in creative ways because he wouldn't be able to read it to them. And so oftentimes he would play a character. He would come up with a backstory. He would go in disguise. One particular story was he was chasing down two outlaws who were brothers, and they were with their mother in their house, and he dressed up as an unhoused person. I need somewhere to sleep. And of course she takes pity on him because, hello, he's giving actor, he's giving thespian. And so he goes into the house, they have dinner. The outlaws he's about to arrest and the mama, they go to sleep. The minute they fall asleep, he gets up and he gets them arrested. These are the kind of stories that he would have going on. And he worked mostly in like the Oklahoma, that Oklahoma, Texas kind of area. These weren't states yet. So Western Territory, but he also had a lot of people going up to like Detroit areas, like up north-ish, for containment. And that's where the stories from the Lone Ranger were originally broadcast from. So that's the connection that people had. They were like, oh, so obviously we have all these arrest records and the stories about how these people got arrested, dramatize them, put them on the radio. And so people have been making the connection between Bass Reeves' elaborate arrest stories and then the Lone Ranger. Unfortunately, it has kind of been debunked that he is actually the real inspiration for the Lone Ranger, as fun as that would be and as real as that can be, that a Black person's story has been whitewashed and erased. It seems that the Lone Ranger was more inspired by the Mask of Zorro and like Robin Hood stories and things like that, mixed with real life arrest records and stories from the town. So do I still think that Bass Reeves has more of a part to play? Yeah, I do. But I don't think it's on the record as such.
Well, even last month when we had our episode on Black Cowboys, Larry had mentioned that that the Lone Ranger was brought about because of the story of Bass Reeves. And just right. Changed about. So I there's got to be some amount of influence potentially, even if I don't know how old some of those stories are, like the more fictional stories are, but even if those stories are based upon the grumblings of Bass Reeves, like there's still some influence, even if like just because you have like Bass Reeves, then the like fictional stories, and then a movie that was based upon the fictional stories, but the movie was based upon fictional stories that were based upon Bass Reeves, Yeah, right. So it's, by way of potentially.
Yeah. And I also just think that if these stories were coming out in a newspaper and they were as engaging as they sound to me now, just even the one story of him dressing up and going into the house to like hand people their arrest records or, point a gun at them and say, come with me. That's really interesting compared to the degular running down the street, shoot and ask questions later thing.
Yeah.
So I think that there's probably something there. It's just I wish it was a 1-to-1 so we could say, see, because y'all try to take Black people out of this conversation, but it's harder to say that with this story.
Yeah. I think part of his draw to get into, actually, I know this has to be part of it. They had mentioned it in the documentary, was that, his family was enslaved. He was born into enslavement. And his enslaver, George Reeves, he was the son of William Steele Reeves, who enslaved Bass and his family. And so George was the Speaker of the House, and then later he became a Confederate colonel in Texas. And Bass followed Steve a lot, Bass followed George a lot. And so, that influence of maybe being part of the law or, trying to quote, bring people to justice and having some connection there, that is likely what really drew Bass into being part of it. So something that I thought was kind of funny is that eventually, after having worked for the Reeves, Bass was like basically giving it his resignation because he got into a little bit of a little tussle, if you will, and punched the colonel in the face. And so then he fled to Oklahoma, and then that's where he was able to get onto the like Native American land or the reservations and make friends with and learn the language, etc. And really found a safe haven there. And anyway, I thought that was kind of like, I don't know, not a caged animal, but kind of. But then he's essentially kind of goes back to those roots too of working for the man in that sense. Yeah. And I felt like his life kind of plays out between doing what he feels like is right of, no, we've got to bring people to justice and this is the way that it is. But then also the government comes into play and they had talked about, Plessy versus Ferguson and how it's like separate but equal. And then the duality of who he is just as a person and being that sort of law enforcement and then a formerly enslaved Black man. That's where those two worlds collide. And a lot of the people that he was looking to arrest, I mean, for whatever reason, they're fleeing into the native lands like we had talked about. And they're looking to just kind of find their own safe haven there. And he's like, meanwhile, nope, like I'm going to go and kind of, be clever about this. He knows the language, he knows the people, he's got those relationships and then get to arrest the people. But also, he killed a couple handfuls along the way. I think it's kind of interesting to have that and like a time of all times to be Black and a law enforcement officer.
Right. Especially around separate but equal laws coming into place. I believe his fighting with his owner, basically. I believe it was over something petty. Like I think I read it was a card game, but I'm not really sure. But it was something along those lines, like they got to the point of camaraderie, and then immediately it's like, oh, you must have forgot where you were, and then he has to go. It's really interesting.
Like I would have liked to be just like in his mind to wonder how he felt, like especially so you have the person that you work for, basically. You have that good relationship, then they turn on you, and then you're working for the feds, and then they kind of turn on you too with the Plessy v. Ferguson, and then the people that you're going to try and bring to justice, they also don't look like you. They're mainly white men that he's going after, and so they're like, "Who do you think you are trying to come and arrest me when you?" At the time, especially, they're like, you're next to nothing. But then on the other side, he did so well with so many arrests. And it's just like, it's so many things all at once.
It's dizzying. And in the midst of this, to speak to that, he got married as a young man. He married a woman. I want to say that she was Seminole Indian, but they had 2 kids. And obviously when he's off,
I thought they had 10.
They had 10 kids? They had 10 kids?
I thought... Wait, I'm pretty sure he had 10 kids.
Hold on. What am I mixing up?
Hold on. He had 11. Yeah.
No. Wait,
he was married twice and had 11 kids. So he married Nellie. That's the one that I was looking at.
He had 2 marriages. Multiple children. Not 11. 2 children.
Yeah.
He had a whole litter. Wow. Sorry, that was a huge... Hi, I'm undercaffeinated.
Undercaffeinated meet overcaffeinated. And together we are symbiotic.
Lord. So anyway, he had kids, right? So then he had to go off and he wouldn't be able to care for them. And in this documentary that we watched, they talked about they talked about one of his kids. We'll get to this actual story in a second. But the thing that really turned me off in the retelling of that story, and this is not related to Bass, this is more related to culture at large, but they basically alluded to, because he wasn't at the home, he had delinquent children that ended up getting involved in crime. And the way that they presented it sounded like they were blaming it on single motherhood, which frustrates the hell out of me. Because also, one, what choice did he have but to go do that? What was his option? Two, why is it the mother's fault that the world has created a system where young boys and men have to survive? Why is that her fault? You know what I mean? Yeah. And also, this particular documentary came out in 2015. In the first 3 minutes, you'll see someone on screen that, if you have similar feelings as me, you'll roll your eyes hard. But it came out in 2015, which is a year after the Mike Brown murder here in Ferguson, Missouri. And to pull this story out around that time with these kind of, we do everything for the law and order. He was above his emotions and things like that. It felt really propaganda-y. And I think that's why the Bass Reeves presentation, to me, I'm like, I need to hear this from a different perspective, because this law and order push is pointed, specifically in the documentary, pointed as hell. Not
maybe
a fan.
Now that you say that, maybe that's why it didn't resonate like as much with me. On a this was really good. Like, I know that they had some like true historians on there, and that would have been probably a better take to just hear from them, from a more historical perspective, and from the time, and the like more of the factual based, versus pushing that sort of agenda of back the blue kind of thing. Which is definitely more off-putting, I would say, instead of just being able to objectively come to produce this documentary and share with people. I that tracks for me as to why it probably didn't resonate as well. Or maybe give us what we were really looking to learn about.
Yeah, I mean, do I think there's gonna be more? A more in-depth look at Bass Reeves? I'm going to say probably not. I think this might be the angle that we get, because he never learned to read or write. So he just, he wasn't writing books. And I just don't know that we'll get, I'm not going to get what I'm looking for. But a particular story in Bass Reeves' history, which next to the stories of like his light espionage that stands out, is this arrest that really kind of defines the characterization of Bass Reeves, which was to his own son. There was news that someone had killed their wife. It turned out to be his son, and he took on the arrest himself to do so. And also, the son didn't end up staying in prison, which was interesting to me.
He served or supposed to have a life term, and then didn't end up doing the whole life.
Right. That was really interesting to me. And I would guess that it's Bass's influence and connections that might have helped through that, unless there's just a long history of people not staying in prison for killing their wives, which is another that's another thing,
layer of issues
going on. Right. But with the story of him going through with the arrest of his son, actually, no, I'm sorry, the story of him accepting the assignment to arrest his son, because the way that I heard it was an optional thing. And he decided, he was like, I'm going to do it. It's the right thing to do. And then also just the way that people talk about doing the right thing. I have personal criticisms or critiques towards that notion, the same way I had critiques towards like the Mammy character in oh my goodness, what's
Birth
the
of a
movie that
Nation.
Birth of a Nation. Thank you. I have criticisms towards the iconography of those types of characters because it tells a story that I don't think that Black people benefit from hearing. I see that as a trap.
It reminds me of the modern day token Negro kind of thing. Like, it's tough being here, but they'll bring up like Candace Owens or there's some like twins, kind of cowboy-esque twins.
I don't know their names, but
I don't remember. Yeah, I think I've seen them. But anyway, it's the ones that are like, oh no, but look at this Black person who agrees with XYZ. And to me, it seems like almost like those sellouts, like sorry, not sorry. I don't know everything that they necessarily believe in or represent, but I do know that they've been problematic. I mean, we've seen on the accessibility side of it more recently, maybe within the last like 3 or 4 months, clothing brand came out with some underwear that was easier for someone in a wheelchair to be able to like put on kind of thing, or maybe something more comfortable along those lines. And so the advertisements were including them and, people with certain disabilities. And so Candace was like, why do we have to do that? I don't understand. Why do we need to like show that? And it's like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like those kind of problematic things, and which just continues to perpetuate that just the sort of discrimination and don't be inclusive, like be exclusive, like we don't need to see, quote, these things. And it's too, quote, woke. And people say that like it's a bad thing to be aware and to know things. But anyway, so the Bass Reeves, I guess, imagery of a person, I feel like we see now. But I think what's interesting, at least in watching the documentaries, to that 40-minute one and then the 16-minute one, the 16-minute one, he talked way too fast, but I felt like he was more on the dot of like, historically speaking. And so I did appreciate it and kind of rewound a couple times just to be like, hold on, what did you say? But again, with the country kind of turning their back on, feeling like the country sort of turned their back on Bass Reeves, I think that was a very indicative of what's going on now too, because there are still things that happen, but then those same people will try and like talk it away, and they're still going to do what they do. And then even when, Bass Reeves, same thing, like he basically was like, I'm going to show you I'm so dedicated to this that I'm going to turn my own son in. And it's like, dang, like, where's the line? No, like, where do you give it up and be like, no, but my people, So that's
it's hard. Bass Reeves is a complicated, I think a lot of these historical figures that are Black, that are involved in government in any way, shape, or form besides activism are going to be way more complicated looking at it through our lens today. And I also find it to be super interesting that Bass Reeves, like the profile of Bass Reeves hadn't been ticked up really until after we had an influx of like police brutality conversations and things like that. They're like, wait, there is an amazing Black officer. Yes. From the late 1800s. Yes. But
was he formerly enslaved? Yes. Like, right.
But, he did the right thing. It's like that. And also like, I was watching that and hearing about the arresting the son, like, well, bro, you killed your wife. So you gotta go. You know what I mean? To the guillotine, bro.
But there was nobody else that could, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not, he was maybe a great U.S. Marshal, but he was not the only.
No. And
being
also
like,
something else that kind of was interesting was that until learning a little bit about Bass, I thought he was the first, just the first lawman. You know, I thought that was the case, but just like the Cowboys and just like damn near everything else, Black people have been in it since since its inception. And you can replace it with any kind of industry. Like Black people have been around. So that's another interesting thing, because I believe it was positioned as like, this is the lawman, the first Black lawman. And there's even a show coming out based on Bass Reeves's life. I think it's called The First Lawman. Wait, I'm gonna double check that. It's from the people who bring us to Yellowstone, and it's kind of right wing propaganda ish, and I'm anxiously waiting to see what's gonna come of it. So anxious. It's called Lawmen, Bass Reeves.
And it turns out there was about 20% of the lawmen on the western side of the U.S. that were Black, that they had mentioned in the documentaries, and it's just not as well known. So maybe like the first popularized or the first to come to fame versus the first ever.
Right. And also, like, there are photographs of Bass Reeves. I can also see that he would be favored. I need to see the rest of the lineup, but like Bass Reeves was low key kind of fine. Okay. Like Bass Reeves was fine. I'm not licking boots, but Bass Reeves come around, you're looking. So yeah, he's a great example of that. Same reason why Rosa Parks was pushed to the forefront, because Rosa Parks was cute. Claudette Colvin, however, did the same thing. Teenage pregnant and dark no. Put her up there. So Bass Reeves, oh fine ass, go up there. And I'm sure there was a lot of people, a lot of men that did similar things to Bass Reeves. I'm sure that there were people in law enforcement that maybe didn't even have a choice to go arrest their family, maybe even for charges that weren't even valid, just because you got to prove your loyalty to us. Go do that. It's so complicated. It's so complicated.
Yeah. Well, then in April of 1884, things really just kind of took a turn because he was stripped of his badge for accidentally killing a cook out in a camp. And I feel like they just really decided to try and make an example of him at that time, I believe after some time, that's when they then had sort of redacted it and try to expunge a record. But I think the damage had already been done.
He, because of his connections, kind of slid through that. And whether or not he accidentally killed this person or not, I don't know. They said that he killed the person on accident because he was cleaning his gun. Sure. But another aspect of that is that, like, he arrested 3,000 people, which benefits the courts, the same courts that he was going to be tried through. So I think that a level of that was like, all right, Bass, like, we got you, but we have to do this. We have to prove to everyone that we are fair too, But then afterwards, there was separate but equal, and separate and equal meant we're not going to have you on the law enforcement team at all. So Bass Reeves was an officer damn near to the end of his life. But also, like, the officers that weren't marshals or weren't as skilled as Bass Reeves, they were not doing takedowns and espionage and all that stuff. They were handing out like citations, So I'm sure that towards the end of his life, it got way less exciting. One, he was older. And then two, he wasn't able to serve at as high of a ranking as he was used to. So maybe that explains the fizzle out of the story. They have moved on, to some new young hero. It is so interesting how much family drama Mr. Bass Reeves had. That's because he was fine. That's what he gets.
Oh my God.
It's always that. But yeah, okay. So he died as a police officer, and that was his life. And that's his legacy. It really does end with a kerplunk, doesn't it? It's like, okay. Oh, Bass. I don't know. Bass Reeves is such a hard. It's a difficult thing for me to connect with. just the Bass Reeves story and the mythos around Bass Reeves, just because of what it means to me today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough, but I do recommend people watching HBO's Watchmen, not just because of the Bass Reeves influence in that story, because our main character is also a police officer, so that would be a Black police officer, so that would be the tie there. But also, it's just a great show. It's just a great show. Do I think that future iterations of Bass Reeves require some historical context in great detail? Yes, much like the upcoming movie Killers of the Flower Moon, or whatever that's called. What is that? Killers of the Flower Moon, yeah, about the Osage murders. That's definitely gonna shake the table for people that talk about westward expansion without talking about what actually went down. And I think when we talk about Bass Reeves, we kind of have to get into that information too. So we'll see. Will that happen? I don't know. If the productions keep being what we saw, probably really not.
No, not I mean, we're talking about almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago that one came out. And so I think we're at the point in time where there's going to be more due diligence, I would hope, and give us the story of Bass Reeves that not only that we really want, but also that'll do him some more justice of telling his story.
Yeah. I'm also interested to now know about the other children and what they went on to do.
The 9 you didn't account for?
The others. Because I'm over here like, yeah, he had 2 kids. Like, one was bad, one was good. Oh my goodness. But this is not an iHeartMedia production. I didn't have interns looking it up. Okay. We're just trying to talk and learn a little bit. How do you feel now knowing a little bit about Bass Reeves?
The same. I don't know. Again, I think we need something a little bit more impactful. Or maybe it just isn't one of those things. Like, not everything is going to resonate with everyone. Not every topic that we cover is going to be like our favorite. But and this might be one of my non-favorites, but that doesn't negate the ability to recognize and so have an appreciation for the path that likely was forged for so many more people to come to be in that career field, I guess, if that's something that they were interested in, from hopefully not the same give up on your own kind of people. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear if you're able to get any insight about someone else's relationship with Bass Reeves that may be a little closer to the topic and a little more maybe interested in how that became part of their story, or if they even know about
reach out. I did reach out to Trent, and it's his birthday, and so happy birthday, Trent. And but no, so he wasn't able to come on, but maybe another day I can get that, and it'll be a little bonus episode.
Yeah, that'd be cool. At least interesting, because like you said, it's just not for me. It's just not for me. Yeah. But I'm glad that we learned about him. And I think we have a little suite of episodes and people in history that have had to survive by engaging with the government in ways that we wouldn't support so much in a modern day context. And so that's just difficult territory to talk about, because they had to do what they had to do, and we question those motivations now because of what we know. But here we are. All right, Donna, it's time for Now You Know. Okay, so keeping in theme with Black people working in government, our Now You Know is a little bit of a teaser for our next episode, in which we'll be talking more about the judicial system. But we wanted to bring up some important people that have taken or have been a big part of that system's development. And that first person that comes to mind would be Thurgood Marshall. He was the first Black judge on the Supreme Court. He spent a lot of his life in legal spaces, and I don't want to talk too much about that in detail because we'll be talking about that in our next episode. But I do highly recommend you all checking out this book by Gilbert King. It's called Devil in the Grove. It's about the Groveland boys case, and without any kind of spoilers, it's about an accusation against young boys against a white woman. And Thurgood Marshall at the time was a lawyer who came down and worked on the case. I will say no more. I highly recommend Devil in the Grove by Gilbert King to get a little bit more of information about Thurgood Marshall's life. But part of his life was starting the Legal Defense Fund, which is really interesting. It's the country's first and foremost civil and human rights law firm. He founded it in 1940, and that was before he became a U.S. Supreme Court justice. And it launched at a time when the nation's aspirations for equality and due process of law were stifled by widespread state-sponsored racial inequity. And from then to now, it's been completely transformative to how Black people navigate the legal system and the judicial system.
Yes, and part of that help has also come about with Constance Baker Bodley. So she rose to prominence as a chief courtroom strategist of the civil rights movement. She was a key strategist in the fight for desegregation in the South. And so from 1945 to 1964, she worked on a lot of those major school desegregation cases that were brought forth by the LDF. She also originally wrote the complaint of Brown versus the Board of Education. She led a lot of the litigation of the case that integrated the University of Georgia and directed the legal campaign that resulted in the admission of James H. Meredith to the University of Mississippi in 1962, paving the way for integration of universities across the South.
Another woman in the system that you all, if you haven't been living under a rock, you saw the confirmation hearing for Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was the first Black woman U.S. Supreme Court Justice. And she was sworn in on June 30th, 2022. And since her first nomination, LDF has been an ardent supporter of Jackson. So it's all tying together, of course. She previously worked as a public defender and served on the U.S. Sentencing Commission and served as a federal judge before ultimately being nominated to the Supreme Court. Her work as a public defender and in private practice in service to the U.S. And tenure as a federal judge made it clear that she had the range of legal experience. And now she is a U.S. court justice. So it's pretty interesting that the work from 1940 has led us to here, and we are just now at the first.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of first, so Natasha Murrell, which is a newer name for me. So she served at LDF. She has been serving at LDF since 2016. But most recently, she has served as the Deputy Director of Litigation and is the first attorney since LDF's founder, Thurgood Marshall, to be confirmed directly from the LDF to the federal bench. This is super recent too. So on June 21st of 2023, she was confirmed by the U.S. Senate to the U.S. District Court of the Eastern District of New York, nominated in 2022 by President Biden. Because Murrell has just done so much advocacy work for her confirmation since she was nominated, and has sent letters to the Senate Judiciary Committee in support of her nomination. And so she's been exceptional as a civil rights litigator and really committed to the protection of democracy. And so all good things come in fours, which is not the saying, but in this instance of trailblazers with Black judges and in the, I guess, government setting, these people with LDF have really done an incredible job.
And now you know.
Of course, you guys, we will drop all of the links to the sources and resources that we have used for the production of this episode in the show notes. So be sure to check that out for the content of the episode, but also for our Now You Know segment. We appreciate y'all for joining us each and every month. If you think that more people can benefit from this conversation, please be sure to share the podcast with a friend or family member. Also, don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to Now We Know wherever you listen. You can find me on Instagram at Donna Janine, or if you want to drop us a note, any feedback or maybe suggestions on people that you'd like us to cover, send us an email at realrelatablepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.